When you think of the greatest scorers in NBA history, who do you think of? Michael Jordan, LeBron James, Steph Curry, Wilt, Kevin Durant? What if I told you that out of the top 6 players of all time in career points per game, only one averages less than 36 minutes per game, and he has the highest points per minute in NBA history? Any guesses? That player would be Joel Embiid, and he's in the midst of making history once again, where he could become only the second player ever to average more points than minutes per game. This is just the start of what he's doing this season on his way to possibly another MVP award. Going into this season, the Sixers were expected to take a downturn after having James Harden on the team, but him sitting out. No one knew what would happen to him as he was still on the roster to start the season. The consensus would be that Embiid and company would be able to still take this team to a top 4 seed in the East, but just not be good enough to compete with the reloaded rosters of Boston and Milwaukee. Instead, Tyrese Maxey would take a massive jump in production, the addition of Kelly Oubre would be huge off the bench, and Joel Embiid would continue to show growth even after winning the MVP last season. Let's start with what we know right now. If the season ended today, as of my recording, Joel Embiid would average 34.8 points per game and 34.1 minutes per game. This would put him in elite company, like I mentioned earlier. Wilt Chamberlain has been the only player to do this in NBA history. That season, he put up 50.4 points per game. The crazier part was that he was averaging 48.5 minutes per game that season, which means that he was playing overtime in most of his games. To put this into perspective, if Embiid played 48.5 minutes this season, he would average around 49.5 points. He is also in the midst of a 30-point game streak of 16 games, which just tied Kobe Bryant for second all-time. The man in first, Embiid's former teammate James Harden, with a whopping 32 straight games with 30 points. Embiid is only halfway to the record, but if anyone could break it, it would be Embiid at this point. The season Harden had that record, he averaged 36.1 points and 36.6 minutes per game, so just missed out on the record as well. Let's talk about why Embiid is only averaging 34 minutes per game. As of recording, Embiid is averaging 3.86 minutes played in the fourth quarter this season. This would be the lowest by scoring leaders all time as well. The reason? The Sixers have the highest point differential this season with a margin of 10.1. Embiid hasn't needed to play the fourth quarter this season, so why would he? If we adjust his stats to see what he could potentially average if he played 36 minutes per season, he would be closer to 37 points. Logically, if we think about this, Embiid will end up playing more minutes this season. The Sixers won't be blowing teams out like this all year, and with more minutes, that could mean that Embiid may not average as many points than minutes, but for now, he is at that mark. The closest we have seen to this in recent memory was Harden, like I mentioned before, but he just missed out. With all this information, where does Embiid rank amongst players all time in points per minute? Like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, Embiid has the highest points per minute in NBA history among players with 250 plus games played. Is this because the NBA is becoming more fast-paced? You could lead into that argument as Luka Doncic has the second highest with 0.81 points per minute, and Trae Young is in fifth. It's really a mixed bag when you get into it, with Michael Jordan appearing in the third spot, as expected, but George Gervin in the fourth spot. KD, Curry, and LeBron are also in there to round off the top 10, so clearly the best scorers will make their way onto this list. Embiid has also been averaging 20-plus points every season of his career, which helps his case, and he has never averaged more than 35 minutes, with 3 of his seasons coming with 30 or less minutes, which also continues to add into his stats all time. Why do I bring all of this up? Of course, Embiid is having a historic season. He could end up breaking multiple records this year and go down in history, but I don't think people are giving him enough credit for this, which I understand. Embiid is one of the league's biggest stars, which always comes with backlash, and he plays into his villain role at times, which makes him have a lot of enemies. Many are quick to point out his free throw attempts, which lead him to scoring a lot of points, which is a valid point, but you could easily combat that by just saying, don't foul him. I'll bring in stats though. If we compare both Wilt's 50-point season and Embiid's current season, they both made about the same free throws per game, but Wilt actually took more per minute than Embiid. Embiid just happens to be better at the line, being one of the best in the league and at his position. So how much does this record really matter? As we've said, only one person in the NBA's complete history has had a season averaging more points per minute, being Wilt Chamberlain. And we have only seen 15 seasons where a player has gone out and averaged more than 0.9 points per minute in the NBA. So it is a very tough task to do. Some of these players being George Gervin, like we mentioned before, Steph Curry, Michael Jordan, Luka Doncic from this season, Joel Embiid from last season was at 0.96 points per minute. So he was very close last year. Giannis has 2 of the top 5 seasons in NBA history as well. So Joel Embiid will be very close to this record. James Harden, like we mentioned before, 0.98 points per minute in previous years too. He was not able to get the record. So Joel Embiid would be able to compete for the all-time record too with Wilt Chamberlain, who is at 1.04. But as long as he gets 1 or more points per minute, he will be able to join elite company in NBA history and add something else to his resume for his MVP campaign this season, which is already off to a very strong start. The main message, even if Joel Embiid doesn't break the points per minute record this season, even if he doesn't even get to 1 point per minute this season, in the end, he's still going to average close to 35 points per game by the end of the year, unless something insane happens. He could go on and break that 30-point game record this season. There is a lot that he has up for grabs, and I think we need to start talking about him being in that greatest scorer of all time conversation. And I know it may be a little early, but he is now in his 8th season, and he has averaged 20 plus points every single year. 20 points in his first season, going to 27 in his third, 28 in his fifth, and he has continued to improve since his 5th season when he averaged 28, then 30, last year with 33, this year with close to 35. He is on pace to continue to get better every single season. He has some of the best footwork that we have seen from a big man in a long time. He is one of the best free throw shooters at his position and just overall in the league, as we know. I think Joel Embiid needs a little more respect as the greatest scorer of all time. I'm not going to give him the throne just yet, but I do think that if we're going to start having conversations about it, Joel Embiid's name should at least be in the ring, should be in the hat. He is going to be the 4th highest points per game player of all time in the NBA, right behind Luka, Wilt, and Michael Jordan. So he is definitely an incredible scorer, and it seems like he's just getting to the peak of his career on his way to get a potential second MVP. Now, let me know down below. I know this is a little bit of a controversial take. I know a lot of people aren't huge fans of Joel Embiid, but the stats are there for everyone to see. Let me know down below. Do you think he should be considered as one of the greatest scorers of all time, or is it still a little too early? And I'll see you guys in the next one.